Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Christian Barrientos, just an international business lawyer. I talk with Martin Arostegui around the world with this important journalists investigate now in this moment in Ukraine. We talk about the Russia and every other assumption or matters in the world. Martin Arostegui is a renowned and highly experienced journalist, especially in military and intelligence matters, who has recovered the king of international conflicts. We are now seeing deploying in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, Fox News, CNN, United Press International, and France 24. And he's author of a book about the military special operation. That's very interesting, called Twilight Warriors, and find it by Amazon. You can buy this book, very important edition. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Christian. Nice to be on board, as always. Well, I think today's for today's podcast, we've got to start out with an update of what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. As you know, the situation there remains highly fluid. Things are changing all the time. And while there doesn't seem to be any major Russian breakthrough at the moment in their efforts to take the central part of Donbass, around the Kramatorsk region, which encompasses very important gas fields. And while they seem to have taken all of Mariupol, which, except for a holdout there, the steelworks by, highly motivated Azov battalion, about 2,000 men spread out over a 4 square kilometer area, which is going to be very difficult to take. Putin has said that he's not going to try it for the moment, supposedly because he just doesn't want to deal with the kind of casualties his forces face that they did try an all-out assault. Nonetheless, the Russians today have bombed, shelled, or at least sent a missile strike against the key port city of Odessa, which is to the west of Crimea. It's Ukraine's main port. Okay, and until now, it hadn't been. Well, they tried to take it by land. That attempt was repelled. It had more or less been left on its own. They hadn't really redoubled an offensive against it. We don't know if this missile strike that happened, I think, the past 24 hours, the indication that they are planning a concerted assault on Odessa, or simply that it's a warning shot, or simply that maybe they're settling in for a siege. Odessa on the sea, making it much more vulnerable, as it can be shelled from the sea by Russian submarines and missile cruisers and destroyers, like one that the Ukrainians sunk not too long ago, last week. And so it is more vulnerable than if it depended purely on a land assault, because in Kiev, what happened is that the Russians could never get close enough to be able to shell Kiev with their artillery on a constant basis. If they can do this from the sea with Odessa, I think we could be looking at another type of Mariupol scenario in which the city could be, reduced to rubble over an attritional offensive over a long period of time, even if they cannot take it by land. So we have yet to see. I mean, could be the start of something. It may just be a warning shot. But Odessa obviously would be a very key target if the Russians can manage to take it. If they can take Odessa, it would close their control over all of Ukraine's southern coastline and link up with this Russian strip of breakaway land in Moldova, Transnistria, where in fact there are already some Russian troops already deployed there as part of an agreement with Moldova. So it would encircle Ukraine. It would deny it. It would landlock the part of Western Ukraine, which they so far, and I don't think have any chance of ever taking. or occupying. And if Ukraine were to emerge from this war, it would do so as a landlocked, wrong state. I mean, all its coastline gone, all of its if they can't hang on to Kramatorsk gas field in central Donbass, all of its main energy source gone, and all of its industrial network in the southern part of Ukraine also gone. So it would be a very that would be a very, very strong blow if they do manage to take it up. And indications are that they may be trying to angle that. They may be trying to.
So, in this special operation in Donbass, is the president of the mercenary you talked in last podcast, the Wagner Group, and to want to kill the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and now back to Donbass to control this area with this mercenary group. Is it possible to control all this area with this group?
Well, obviously they cannot control the whole area of the group. The group you're talking about, 2,000 men at the very most. But they certainly provide backbone. They can do things which maybe regular Russian troops cannot do. They operate in civilian dress. They can assassinate and eliminate maybe local resistance leaders, local political figures that are against Russia. They can also maybe give a bit of backbone to the Russian army itself. Maybe perhaps act against whatever elements of the Russian army are not following orders or seem to be in a state of rebellion. They're also, of course, very involved with the mercenary units that are going into Ukraine. They're recruiting, as we spoke of before. They're recruiting Hezbollah militants in Syria, as well as other Syrian troops, Syrian militias they fought with in the long civil war in Syria. They're actively recruiting them to go and fight in Ukraine. Obviously, in units that would be very much incorporated or operate under the Wagner Group's network. They're undoubtedly involved with the Chechens. Basically, they're in charge of irregular warfare. They would operate with the shock units, with the special mercenary units, which are being recruited and being deployed to conduct the type of operations that the Russian army will not or cannot conduct. I think what happened the news, there's some news this week. One is that the Ukrainian British military intelligence reports that, in fact, the Wagner Group has had to be so active in Ukraine, possibly due to the inability trying to fill in the role of the Russian army on many occasions, that they've taken a huge amount of casualties. One report speaks of 3,000 Wagner Group killed. That's maybe about 40-50% of the entire unit. Obviously, you can recruit more. They would be recruiting more Wagner operatives, I guess, from the special forces, from the Spetsnaz and other elite units in the Russian army. I imagine that's an ongoing thing, so I think they can fill the ranks. But still, these are highly trained men, and the loss of 3,000 of them is quite a blow. Furthermore, I mean, it comes to the point when I think, well, the financier, the financier of the Wagner Group, the finance director, the CEO, because it operates the company, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was spotted in the Donbass region of Ukraine, I think, in the Donetsk area. Obviously taking personal control of his units there, which obviously a key part of the you realize this unit is directly directed by Putin. The Yevgeny Prigozhin is known as Putin's chef. He cooks up things that Putin needs. In fact, he was running one of the troll farms, a major troll farm for Putin some years back that was involved in the covert efforts to raise support for the Catalan independence movement in Spain. They were operating, sending out thousands of fake Twitter accounts to boost the cause, which Russia was doing for the separatists. And this was traced to a property near St. Petersburg owned by Yevgeny. So, yes, I mean, he obviously conducts highly sensitive operations for Putin. And he's now in Donetsk, this man who's one of Putin's most closest collaborators, closest confidants, is now there, indicating, of course, the extent to which, his presence is required. I mean, one of the reasons that a lot of generals have been killed in Ukraine is because they have to actually get to the front line because the army isn't operating properly. And the officers of the chain of command is breaking down and need the top guy, there with the personal link to Putin there to direct him, because otherwise things are very shaky. So he's been there, I think, probably passing money around. I think he's probably paying off the Wagner teams, the foreign mercenaries as well. I imagine he has to pay off make sure that the Syrians and the Chechens are happy. You know how the Arabs are about money. And so I imagine that's probably the main thing he's doing there, making sure that the guys are getting paid, unlike the average Russian soldier that could just starve to death and they can't try. They can't treat Wagner quite in this way. But I mean, again, what ultimate effect the Wagner group is going to have there? I mean, we now are getting reports that what was at first very much feared, was the Wagner team that had been penetrated into Kiev at the time of the offensive against Kiev. We're talking about 200 men, who were supposed to operate covertly in Kiev. It's a lot of men for a covert operation, but anyway, that's what they had. Supposedly, according to these reports, it was supposedly backed by British intelligence. They all got wiped out. All the Wagner's entire column, covert, undercover column in Kiev got totally wiped out. And I don't think they managed to kill a single. They certainly didn't manage to assassinate Zelensky, who was their main target. And I don't think they managed to get a single leader of the government or leading politician, anti-Russian politician, as far as I can see. It didn't happen. So it was completely ineffective, and the entire team was destroyed. Frankly, Christian, I think from what I see so far, I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of double agents, FSB double agents in Ukraine. Certainly, at the initial part of the offensive, after they may be identified by now. Probably, imagine they make Russia. But no, and we knew that supposedly the FSB had Ukraine blanketed with operatives, right? I think a lot of these turned out to be double agents, and I think they gave away a lot of information. They were misinforming Moscow and probably informing the Ukrainians about Russian deployments. So I think that's the only way you explain that this covert team of 200 Wagner Group operatives were wiped out in Kiev before they could even do anything. Right? So I think that's what may be going on. In fact, I wonder, did you ever see the movie Taylor in Panama with Pierce Brosnan?
No,
very good movie.
I don't
about a British agent in Panama that invents some opposition movement that's going to topple the government, so the U.S. can take back the canal. Or something. That's basically the story. He gets a lot of money from the Americans to pull off this coup, and of course the squirrel, just runs away with the money. While everything collapses. I wonder if something like that didn't happen in Kiev. You had the FSB telling Putin that they had it all set up there. That they had a shadow government set up, and they were all going to be welcomed there with roses and kisses, and that the new government would take over in no time, and and probably got a lot of money out of them to do that. Maybe the whole thing just disappeared.
Yeah.
They're gone with the money now. God knows where, to the Maldives or something, which I think we're thinking about. You got a lot of Russian. So wondering if something like that happened. In order to get out of Kiev, maybe passed on some information to the Ukrainians about who the Wagner group people were coming in, so they could wipe them, they could kill, get rid of, assassinate all of them, get rid of all of them.
Tremendously.
So that's.
Tremendously.
If I ever write it, I think I should probably. I've done fiction. I once wrote a fiction novel called The Hostage. So I probably should. This really lends itself. I think I'm going to give it a try. Honestly, this will lend itself to. God, I hope too many people are listening to this podcast. They may steal my idea. Because I really honestly think there's something like this must have gone on. Honestly, really. There's a lot of double agenting going on here, without question. But I wonder, however ineffective the Wagner Group may have proved in Ukraine, in Kiev, or in
Donbass.
Now, hopefully, whatever they're doing in Donbass. They're doing it more effectively in what appears to be like a series of covert assassinations of oligarchs who are both in Russia and abroad, who are unloyal to Putin, or could be unloyal to Putin. You know how totalitarian governments operate. It's not whether you don't have to prove your loyalty, you have to prove that you're not going to be disloyal. They act preemptively. If they think you're going to be disloyal, that's a death sentence for their. So yeah, 6 oligarchs, people holding top positions in the gas industry, in Russian finance, in mining, have been eliminated. Have died over the past since March. 2 died over the past week. One of them here in Spain, another one in the UK, and another one in Moscow. Sorry, 3. And 3 others have died previous to that, since the invasion of Ukraine started. Since March, there have been these strange murder-suicides happening, in which not only the guy not only kills himself, but his entire family. So he stabs. In a lot of them, he stabs or shoots them, the wife and the children, in this case, the daughter, before killing himself or hanging himself or something like that. So it's not something that you normally would happen, and certainly not a succession. You've got 2 or 3 now. 6. Sorry, 6 total. These are murder-suicides happening in the same way, in a very similar way. Of these oligarchs, which two of whom had actually publicly or openly opposed the invasion of Ukraine and said they thought it was a bad idea. So this could be maybe Wagner Group operating in a totally covert way, with covert hit squads, highly trained, because it's obviously very professional job. They don't seem to have that much trace that they were killed by anybody from the outside. And when you're talking about eliminating an entire family and not leaving any traces, that's obviously you have to have very highly trained people for that, which Russia has. In fact, it not only has the Wagner Group, it has a special unit of the Russian intelligence service called the GRU, which is Unit 29155. This is a unit of the GRU, of the Russian Military Intelligence Service, specialized in covert eliminations. They're the ones that poisoned Skripal in the UK. They have one of their generals, Denis Sergeyev, apparently takes personal control and at least setting up the infrastructure for these operations. And he's been traced to several killings, previous assassinations of Russian dissidents or defectors from the FSB, all over Europe and the UK. And he was also, he operated in Spain. In fact, he operated in an area of Spain very close to where the assassination of Sergei Protorenia took place just a few days ago. And he's, this guy, this general leads this unit which specializes in these types of operations. So I would not be at all surprised if this is another unit that is now being deployed to conduct assassinations against Russians and perhaps other. They could up the scale and also target non-Russians abroad that they're afraid of. Putin is afraid of.
For complementation, this information about the cooking, the Putin's cooking, we have the web.
Putin's cook.
Yeah, Putin's
cook. Putin's chef. I don't think Putin cooks very much. I don't think he does much cooking for himself.
Putin's chef.
Occasionally, you'll see him, grill a fish or something like that.
Yeah. The real name is Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin. He's by FBI web page. We have the most wanted for the country.
Yevgeny Prigozhin. Yeah, that's
this is description about this mercenary oligarch. It's interesting. Mercenary and oligarch.
Wagner Group operates as a company. Okay, so he's the CEO, right?
Yeah, CEO.
The actual commander, the field commander, is a guy called Dmitry Utkin. He was a colonel in the special forces, the Spetsnaz. And he's the one who actually he's the senior field operative. He conducts the actual field operation. But this, as it operates in the company, the CEO is Prigozhin, and of course, that's what I think. I mean, he must be in Donbass, making sure everybody's getting paid, because he had purse strings. He controls the money. So that's probably what he's doing. Another thing you got to bear in mind is how could the Wagner Group maybe help Putin break the sanction. Bear in mind that, for example, now it becomes very difficult for Russia to sell gold and diamonds to India, for example. There's some problems there. They've always traditionally bought a lot of gold and diamonds from
India.
From Russia, India.
But
they're now encountering problems there. What in the continuing trade for gold and diamonds that they were trying to continue to do despite the sanctions, they're running into all kinds of problems. It can't be done through the regular banking system. And no purchase from any Russian company, of course, is going to get any banking support or it can be paid through the SWIFT system and like that. But I wonder if you get the Wagner Group controlling countries in Africa and as well as some in Latin America, Venezuela, which is the gold.
Venezuela, yeah.
But they could maybe fool the sanctions or work their way around the sanctions by moving gold and diamonds from those countries directly to third markets without them going through Russia to the Russian system. In other words, if the Congo, or I think they're in the Congo, they're in Equatorial Guinea, say, some diamond, they're in 12 countries, the Wagner Group, 12 countries in Africa, and offering security advice at very high level, obviously in exchange for their access to local resources. So they could be selling gold and diamonds from Africa and from Venezuela without them going through Russia or through any Russian directly to third countries. It could be instead of the gold or diamonds going to India from Russia, they could be getting shipped from Africa, and be traded on a barter basis, that way it avoids the sanctions. It's the way around them. I mean, I don't think this can be done in any large scale, but we don't know. Maybe that's another function that the Wagner Group could be fulfilling for Putin. I mean, the sanctions. Listen, I mean, there's always a way around these sanctions. You think that Cuba has been sanctioned now for over half a century. When you think that Venezuela has been sanctioned now for, I think maybe over 5 years, and it's a lot of local opposition to pressure on Europe and the government operates. I know the sanctions against Russia are much stronger and much more comprehensive. They've hit them in a much more, they have been gradual, they've hit them in a much more shocking way. It's been the entire world, not just a few countries that adhere to them. But still, I mean, Russia is a much bigger country also with a lot more resources and capable of exercising a lot more international leverage. So while the sanctions are having their effect on the general population, I think there are vast food shortages in Russia. I think, I was reading an account the other day that apparently the cabbage, the Russians buy a lot of cabbage. It's a staple product, it's a part of their everyday diet. There's now such a shortage of cabbage, which in Russia was grown like leaves on trees. They're now selling quarter cabbages, right? Because people just can't afford to pay the price of the entire one. So it definitely is having a terrible effect on it. It could lead to, perhaps some form of malnutrition, maybe starvation in some areas at some point. But, is it affecting Putin's upper circle or Putin's ability to deploy his army? In some areas it is. For example, it is affecting some military industries. I believe there's some tank producers that don't have materials to produce more tanks right now because of the import ban. Or the export ban from the West, import to Russia. And I believe that now Europe, I think, is beginning to cut off its purchases of Russian oil, I think, and gas. I think Austria has cut it off, although Austria can probably get it from other sources. It's also a pretty small country. Germany is speaking of cutting it off next week. I don't know. I mean, they said that, but there's been a tremendous backlash on the part of labor unions and the corporate sector who say that they cannot afford to have the economy paralyzed like this. We don't know if ultimately Schultz will have to walk. Premier Schultz would have to walk this back. But even so, sanctions have as a weapon to bring about an early defeat of Russia or impede it soon to be able to continue its war effort. I don't see it with resistance. I really, really don't. Even under the best, even if they're adhered to in the most consistent way by the U.S. and Europe, I see it very, very difficult. The sanctions alone are going to do the job. There are always ways around them. I just gave you one of them. Wagner Group could be using its leverage on Africa, countries that it controls in Africa and South America, to move gold, silver, diamonds, and maybe oil to third markets, going totally around the sanctions. So that's something that could be happening.
Very interesting your analysis about the Wagner Group and the business. Interesting, have a diamond, Africa, around the world, Latin America. Now, what is the next to analysis for this moment? To do you talk about the sanction, the Russian sanction is work about the oligarchs, but the people is in this case the people who have this sanction too. What happened with the? Is necessary more sanction or change the strategy for the attack the
well, no, they're doubling down on sanctions. That's what's kind of, they've been trying now for I don't know how long to make sanctions work in against every country that the United States has a problem. As I said, the only country in the world that have been regime change or political change has been brought about with sanctions in South Africa. And that was due to a very special situation. And it wasn't just in that case, in that case, it wasn't just the United States, it was the entire world. And which supposedly is what they're trying to do with Russia, but I'm not sure it's working. I mean, I don't think China is going along with sanctions at all. I think they're quite actively backing Russia economically. So they're doubling down on the sanctions. They're now expecting Germany to announce next week that it will stop importing Russian gas.
I think interesting.
If that works, maybe that would be quite a blow. Obviously, that would be a big source of revenue that would be cut off. But again, they find a way of getting it. They seem to find if they need the money, if a country as big as Russia needs them, and which have the international leverage Russia has through military and other means, want the money, they can somehow get it. To keep going. I mean, not in any great way. The Russian people are going to suffer. They're the ones who will suffer the most. But I think the regime can probably keep going, and the military, or at least enough of the military to continue to try to at least consolidate their hold on eastern Ukraine until they're capable of doing that. I think that's their main objective there. Zelensky has just warned that if Russia continues, a third of Russian gas exports to Europe will be lost. What did he mean by that? I'm sorry, I'm asking my advisor here. Yes, what Zelensky is saying apparently is that if Russia continues to with its campaign in Ukraine, which is already causing, I've told you earlier that I think the reason that they didn't do any major carpet bombing of Kiev, and I've been very careful in Odessa, because that's the key junctions for the pipeline carrying Russian gas to Europe. But apparently with the intensifying war that's going on in eastern Ukraine, that they are hitting pumping stations and various other parts of the gas transport infrastructure, and that if this continues, this in itself could cause a cutoff of at least of a major part of the gas that is going to Europe.
What your analysis about the India in this moment, who is not condemning the invasion, the Russian invasion, but is middle in the position, India, with Russia and around the world, we fight this invasion, criminal invasion. What do you think about the India?
India is highly dependent on Russia. I mean, it's
military.
Not only oil, it's dependent on Russian minerals.
Minerals.
It has major trade with Russia. And it has a massive population and a growing industrial base, and also militarily, a lot of its weapon systems come from Russia. A lot of its weapon systems are Russian. Some are European, some are bought from France, some are bought from the UK, but a lot of its weapon systems, a lot of its military equipment is Russian. So India's in a very difficult position here. I don't think they'll ever back Russia openly, but they certainly will I think they'll certainly collaborate and do everything they can to be able to buy Russian produce outside, if they can skirt the sanction policy and get around the sanction policy in any possible way. So I think that's what India is going to continue to try to do. Unlike China, of course, which is increasingly backing Russia in another way. I mean, they're propaganda-wise, diplomatically, and economically. And probably, as I said, militarily as well at a low level. Probably resupplying some stuff for the logistics, transport, some ammo, that kind of thing. Not yet in any big way. They're not transferring missiles to Russia. I don't think they're likely to do that. But no, I mean, Russia has some pretty big pretty big friends out there.
Yeah. I remember when you talk about the first podcast, you talk about the Ukraine invasion is how Syria is continued a long time in this war. Is possible a long time? How Syria?
That's what everybody seems to predict now.
Yeah.
This will be a war of attrition. It'll be a Syrian type war in which he reduces the opposition basically by just reducing, bombing cities into rubble, never quite achieving a complete submission of the population, but simply destroying the country. And we've got to keep something in mind, Christian. And this is something that ultimately plays to Russian advantage. And it's a factor that has to be taken into account as far as trying to seek and negotiate a solution. Russia ultimately can destroy Ukraine. Ukraine cannot destroy Russia.
Yes.
It can give its army a very hard time. It can make it impossible for Russia to control Ukraine. It can make it impossible for Russia to occupy Ukraine. But it cannot destroy Russia. Ultimately, Russia can keep pouring troops to Ukraine. It can keep pouring arms into Ukraine. It can keep pouring bombs into Ukraine. And it can keep bombing Ukraine, forever. As far as we know. I mean, so ultimately, there's going to have to be some kind of negotiated solution to this. I just don't see it going other way, or this will just go on endlessly. It will go on forever. The problem is that it's very difficult to negotiate with Putin. It's very difficult to negotiate with a man who, well, we don't know really his mental state. I mean, he can't be that crazy, because even when he's going into excess, like destroying an entire city, he's being a little bit cautious. I mean, for example, he's told his army, he's held his army back from an all-out assault on the Azanov steelworks in Mariupol, simply because they know the casualties are going to be huge. 2,000 highly motivated, highly fanatical members of the Azov battalion holding it, and I think you can look forward. You can look at maybe 10,000 Russian casualties in an all-out assault. So he's not that crazy. Okay, I think he does know how far he can go, and he is aware of certain limitations, which is an encouraging sign. But yeah, he must be a very difficult guy. He does lie. I mean, he says one thing, he does another. Sorry, I've got to shut off my telephone.
Okay. For conclusion, this podcast, very interesting. In this moment, we talk about the most important journalist, Martin Arostegui. What is your conclusion, dear friend?
Well, my conclusion, I think, is what I've been saying. I think, everybody's now saying that we're in for the long haul. We're going to be in Syria. In fact, it's interesting that recently Putin he's appointed a lot of the generals that he used in Syria to Eastern Ukraine. So obviously they're going to use the same strategy and tactics they use in Syria, they're going to use in Ukraine. However, Ukraine is not Syria. I mean, it's Europe. Europe is very deep. Europe is very, very deeply involved. The US is very directly involved. You've got NATO there. You've got a lot more international pressure. So that's why I still maintain some confidence that this will ultimately we will get to some sort of negotiated solution eventually. When that's going to be, I don't know. And until then, yeah, the scorched earth tactics that Russia applied in Syria are going to be applied in Eastern Ukraine.
Very interesting analysis. Thank you so much. Everything about the international law, everything about the international security is with Martin Arostegui. Thank you for this podcast, sharing this video, and subscribe to YouTube channel International Law. See you next Saturday with in a podcast with a special edition. Thank you, Martin.
See you next Saturday, Christian. See you then. Sure.
See you later. Bye.